Hi there, KS3. This is part 2 of the lesson for this week. So, part 1 we looked at a waggle together. Part 2 we're going to do some writing together. Reminder that by the end of this week's lesson, I expect you to have written an analytical paragraph about the change in Mary Maloney and Lamb to the Slaughter, and an analytical paragraph about how the police are presented in Lamb to the Slaughter. And both of these are going to be submitted on Show My Homework for your teacher to see and provide you with feedback. Our question was, how does Roald Dahl show the change in Mary Maloney throughout the story of Lamb to the Slaughter? I haven't included the quotations we found for the first part of that because we've written it. These are the ones for the middle, and I'll tell you now that I'm writing about this one here. She rehearsed it several times more. And you will be writing about one of these ones here. So would you mind giving me a drink? He handed her the glass, and in the other room, Mary Maloney began to giggle. So I'm going to be writing paragraph 2. And at the same time, you're going to be writing paragraph 3. So I suggest now that you find your notes from last week about these 2 quotations, decide which one of them you're going to use, and start thinking about which word you might want to pick up on and what this says about how Mary is at the end. Remembering that when you do use a quotation, you don't have to use it all. We'll go into that a bit later, but you can choose a small part of it if you want to. That's absolutely fine. So I'll let you pause there and decide which one you're going to use. Now, the part we identified as being the first part of any analytical paragraph is a statement. We said that clear and straightforward shows you've understood it and you're answering the question. And whatever you put in that statement, the rest of your paragraph follows on from it. So it's really important that once you've chosen your quote, you know that you're going to write a statement that the quote proves. And then it follows on as you go further through. So here's my statement, and I'm going to talk you through it, and then I'm going to let you write your own. Remembering I'm talking about what she does in the middle of the story. So towards the middle of the story, Dahl shows Mary planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder. So towards the middle of the story, Dahl shows Mary planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder. So notice that this thing here, manipulate, means when you're trying to steer people in a certain direction and be untrustworthy and change people's minds and make people think something different. And it shows the change because at the start she was quiet and obedient, and now she's trying to get away with murder. That is quite a big change, isn't it? So let's break down this sentence into the different parts. So firstly, you need to say what bit of the story you're writing about. So I've done that here because I've written towards the middle of the story. Secondly, you always need to clearly name the writer. Now, you could say Roald Dahl or you could say Dahl. What you never do is use the writer's first name. It's just part of how you write about language. You don't ever, they're not your friends, so you don't talk about them by the first name. So you can use the full name or just the surname. So we've done that first bit. We've said where it is. We've named the writer. And then finally, I've made one clear claim regarding what the writer is showing the reader in answer to the question. So yeah, Mary is planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder. And that answers the question because the question was, how does she change? So in the middle of the story, she's starting to manipulate people to try to get away with murder. So I can definitely say I've done all 3 of those. And let's just go through it one stage at a time again, so we're absolutely clear. Oh, yes, indeed. Once you've written your sentence, it's really important to go back and read through it and just make sure it makes sense, because sometimes if you're breaking things down into different parts, you might forget where you started. So always go back and reread. So, firstly, I'm going to state what part of the story I'm writing about. Towards the middle of the story. Then I'm going to clearly name the writer. Dahl shows. And then I'm going to make one clear claim. Mary is planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder. So I've done all 3 of those things in order to write a successful statement, which is the first sentence of a paragraph answering the question. And remember, as always, I've read through it to make sure it makes sense. So now over to you So you're going to be writing about the end of the story. You've already chosen which quote you're going to use. So first you're going to state what part of the story you're writing about. Then you're going to name the writer. Then you're going to make one clear claim. Sorry. So I want you to pause now and have a go writing just that successful statement. Off you go. And once you've written your statement, the next thing you need to do, if we go through the waggle we had earlier, is to write a successful quotation. Now, the quotation is a phrase or a group of words taken from the story that help you work out one thing the writer is showing or suggesting, leading you to make the statement you have given. So the words are from the story. One really important thing, a quotation does not have to be spoken by a character. I said this last week as well. It's just some words from the story. You need to put them in quotation marks. And when we're writing analytically, we need to embed it into a sentence, explaining the context. So embedded is when you write the sentence around the quotation. You don't just write the quotation. You certainly don't write the quote for this is, or this is shown by the quote. You have to write a sentence around the quotation so it fits into the sentence. And it has to explain the context. Sounds a bit complicated, but it isn't too bad. So here's mine. This is implied when, after realizing that her smile looks peculiar, Mary rehearsed it several times more before going to the grocer's. So this is implied when, after realizing that her smile looks peculiar, Mary rehearsed it several times more before going to the grocer's. So let's look at what I've done there. Firstly, I've used a sentence stem to show that I'm going to provide that evidence. So this is implied or this is suggested. You could put this is shown right at the start there. I've embedded my quote within the sentence. So Mary rehearsed it several times more before going to the grocer's. But the only bit that's actually a quote is that bit there. And I've also put it into context. So after she realizes that her smile looks peculiar, that's when she rehearses her smile, and then she goes to the grocer's. So it's really important to do that context bit. Notice it can go before and after. It could go before, it could go after. That's to do with how you place the quote in your sentence, and that's kind of up to you. One thing I will point out is you'll see here I put after realizing that her smile looks peculiar. Now, in the story, she's actually talking about her smile and the way she's talking and the look on her face, but that's quite a lot to put in a sentence. So I've just summarized it using a small part of why she's doing it, and that's absolutely fine. Let's break it down into those smaller parts. As always, remember to read your sentence to make sure it makes sense. So there's my statement. Towards the middle of the story, Dahl shows Mary planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder. So first, I'm going to use that sentence stem to show I'm providing my evidence. This is implied when. Then I'm going to start with a bit of context. After realizing that her smile looks peculiar. So that's what was happening in the story. And then I give the quote. I embed it. I embed it within the sentence using quotation marks. Mary rehearsed it several times more. And then finally, I'm giving another bit of context. But as I said before, actually your context could just be here, it could just be here, or it could be both. That's up to you. So that's the three parts of the quotation sentence. So always remember to check it. Over to you. Here are your quotations. You've already chosen which one you want to use. I'm reminding you again, you don't need the whole quotation. If you just need began to giggle, if you just need would you mind, if you just need handed at the glass, however you want to do it, that's fine. You don't have to write the whole quotation. You're going to have a go and write about what Mary's like at the end of the story. A sentence stem, an embedded quote, and that context. Off you go. Pause the video. Right. We move on from our quotation to our inference. So the inference, I've said, is an explanation of what has been suggested or hinted at through the imagery and ideas presented in the phrase you've selected, and how and why this has led you to make the statement you've been given. So remember, it's always going back to that statement. The statement is proved by the quotation, which you then the inference goes into more detail. Here's my one. This suggests that Mary is determined to get this part of her story right in order to avoid the risk of being caught out. The fact that she is willing to spend time doing this when she is at risk of getting caught makes the reader realise that Mary is actually very clever and is trying to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder and protect her unborn baby. So in this one, remember I talked about it before, I've actually done this one as 2 sentences instead of 1 long sentence, although the second one's quite long as well. So the inference, there's no limit as to how long that can be. This is the most important part of your paragraph, so that it's absolutely fine for it to be quite long. And how have I written my inference? So firstly, I've used the sentence starter such as this suggests or this shows to indicate that I'm going from the quotation onto inference. I've then explained what it suggests about the character, and then I've explained how it increases the reader's understanding of the character, and I've linked it back to the statement. So I've talked about manipulation again. So this suggests, and then here I tell us basically what it says about the character, then I explain it more, and I link it back to the statement. Let's break it down into those 3 parts. Always remember to have a read through once you've read your sentence, written your sentence. So my statement, towards the middle of the story, Dahl shows Mary planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder. Quotation, this is implied when, after realising that her smile looks peculiar, Mary rehearsed it several more times before going to the grocer's. So first I need a sentence starter, don't I? So this suggests that. There we go. Then I need to explain what it suggests about the character. I did that, didn't I? Mary is determined to get this right in order to avoid being caught out. And then finally, did I explain how it increases our reader's understanding of the character? Did I link it back to the statement? Yep. I've said what it makes the reader realise that Mary's actually clever. I've related it back to the statement that she's manipulating the situation in order to get away with murder. Put an extra bit in here that it's our understanding she's actually trying to protect her baby, isn't she? So kind of humanises her for us a bit. Always read your sentence. So I want you to have a go. Writing a sentence starter, explaining what it suggests about the character, and then showing how it increases the reader's understanding, linked back to the statement. Remember, several sentences, 1 long sentence. It's not a short bit of your paragraph, this. So I'd like you to pause the video now and say what your quotation showed about Mary at the end of the story. Off you go. And now we'll move on to the last part of our paragraph. I hope you did reread it all to check it made sense as a whole. We're going to move on to the last part of the paragraph now. How to write about connotations. An explanation of the thoughts, feelings, and ideas associated with a certain word and how this increases our understanding of the quotation in relation to the statement. So we can focus on 1 word. Let's see what I've written here. The verb rehearsed has connotations of getting ready for a performance and making sure everything is exactly right. It suggests that Mary is going to be acting as a shocked widow, and she knows her performance must be perfect or she may be caught out. Let's see what I've done. Have I chosen 1 significant word, stated the word type, and put the word in quotation marks? I have. It's a verb. It's in quotation marks. I've written it there. The verb rehearsed. Have I explained what the connotations of the word are? Yep, I said the connotations are getting ready for a performance, making sure everything is exactly right. Are they relevant to the statement? Yes, they are, because I was saying how she was manipulating things. So we've got to remember that those connotations, you can't just put random connotations down. It's got to be connotations that link back to the statement. Finally, did I explain in detail what they suggest about the character? I did. She's acting like a shocked widow, but she knows if she doesn't get it right, she's going to be caught out. Let's read through the paragraph so far. Towards the middle of the story, Dahl shows Mary planning to manipulate the situation in order to get away with the murder. This is implied when, after realising that her smile looks peculiar, Mary rehearsed it several times more before going to the grocer's. This suggests that Mary is determined to get this part of her story right in order to avoid the risk of being caught out. The fact she is willing to spend time doing this when she is at risk of being caught makes the reader realise Mary is actually very clever and trying to manipulate the situation in order to get away with murder and protect her unborn baby. So, have I chosen 1 significant word from the quotation, stated the word type, put the word in quotation marks? the verb rehearsed. Next, I mean to explain what those connotations are, making sure they're relevant. Connotations of getting ready for a performance, making sure everything is exactly right. Finally, I need to explain in detail what they suggest about the character. They suggest she's acting as shocked widow and knows her performance must be perfect or she may be caught out. And I've read through that to make sure it makes sense. I remembered it this time. So over to you. I want you to select one word from your quotation. I want you to explain what they suggest to the reader. Remember, it could be something new you haven't discussed before, but it still needs to be relevant. You're going to choose one word. You're going to state the word type. You're going to put it in quotation marks. You're going to explain the connotations, and then you're going to explain what they suggest about the character. Pause the video here, and off you go. And now what you should have in front of you is a beautifully written paragraph about what Mary Maloney is like at the end of Lamb to the Slaughter. And I hope you've read it through. I forgot it again to check it makes sense as a whole. One last thing I need you to do on this part of the video. I need you to label each part of your paragraph. So if you've got a highlighter and can do a key, great. If not, you can just label the first word in each paragraph or write in the margin where you're starting to do it. Where's your statement, your quotation, your inference, and your connotations. That's the last thing I want you to do in this part of the video. So I will see you for part 3. Thank you very much.